All righty, well, it is 10 o'clock, so we are going to get started. And welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Good morning, and this is the first of the Colorado Cyber Resource Center's morning Byte of Cyber for 2022. And the name credit goes out to Jonah. The Colorado Cyber Resource Center, or CCRC, is a program of the National Cybersecurity Center. We're a nonprofit based in Colorado Springs dedicated to cyber education and awareness, and the Colorado Whole of State Working Group. My name is Maddie Gullickson, Program Director at the National Cybersecurity Center, and we also have Jonah Wish here, who is our CCRC Program Coordinator. Our contact information is going to be available in the chat here shortly. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the Whole of State Group, it's a collaborative project between cybersecurity and IT government officials across our state and local governments. The Whole of State is dedicated to identifying and developing value-add, low-barrier cyber resources for Colorado's cyber backbone, our local jurisdictions. Our vision is to make Colorado the most resilient state in the country against foreign and domestic cyber attacks. With that, we wanted to kick off this year with a focus on a tool developed by the Federal Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, to help you assess your organization's preparedness against a ransomware attack. It's called the Ransomware Readiness Assessment. And while we must stay vigilant to other forms of cyber attacks, ransomware continues to be one of the most prevalent and successful against local governments. Here to unpack the tool itself is David Sonheim, CISA's Cybersecurity Advisor for Region 8, which includes Colorado. And then we'll conduct a short tabletop exercise with Brissette and JR Noble. Parker is the head of information security for the Colorado Judicial Department, and JR is the senior security engineer, for South Metro Fire District. If you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to add them into the chat. We will have time for questions at the end. And with that, I think we're about ready to get started, but with one final note. Like most of you experience on a daily basis, working in cybersecurity can often feel like you've not only been mandated to boil the entire ocean, but you have to do it all today. And oh yeah, you got thrown into the ocean at the same time to do it. And that's just, it's a lot going on, and we get that. And so we wanted to preface today's discussion with the acknowledgement that there may be parts of the tool that we discussed today, or even the discussion itself, that seem a little bit overwhelming. We'll do our best to make sure that there are some practical takeaways at the end. But the biggest message is to know that you're not alone in this. And that's why we exist and the Whole of State exists. And we are all here and ready to help. And so with that, Dave, I'm going to kick it off to you.
Okay. Thanks, Maddie. Great introduction. Great way to set the stage. Happy to kick it off. I think, Joni, you're going to share the slides here in a second, so they should be coming right up. But if you don't know me, my name is Dave Sonheim. I'm right here with CISA Region 8, so that's the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency in Region 8 here. We do have 6 states in the region: Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, Montana, and the Dakotas. And what we're going to cover today is I'm going to give you the fundamentals of a tool that's kind of a self-help tool that we have available that lets you do a self-assessment. As part of that tool, a recent add is what we call a Ransomware Readiness Assessment. So we're going to cover that. Jonah, are you going to share slides? Because I'm not seeing any just yet. There we go.
There we go, Dave.
Perfect.
Thanks so much.
Okay, so those of you that aren't familiar, hopefully you are, but Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, just CISA.gov, kind of a one-stop shop for cyber alerts, cyber threats, current activities that are happening, as well as tons of resources. So we can move to the next one, Jonah. Here's our a quick agenda for us today, and I'll probably move through some of the initial slides a little quickly. And I believe Maddie said she's recording it. So if something comes up or you're not sure, just feel free to run back through the recording and grab it. But the idea here is just do a real quick intro through these activities, and then we'll jump into the tool, and then we'll let our panelists kind of give us their feedback. We can move to the next slide, Jonah. Okay, so before I get into the specific cybersecurity evaluation tool, I did want to take a second, make sure folks have full awareness of a dedicated website that's been up now for a few months. and it's stopransomware.gov. And the idea here is that even though we have our CISA.gov site, which also has, very similar, if not the exact resources, the idea here is to have a one-stop shop for everything around cybersecurity from a ransomware preparedness as well as incident response. So I just wanted to show you a couple key items that are part of the site here, just so you can kind of navigate roughly. We're going to start off at the very top. I kind of have that yellow circle around resources. So as I move the slides through, we're going to start on the resource one. And then as I move forward, the second yellow circle there will be the second one I hit. And so the idea here is to first show you some key resources that I think are important. And then as we move into the next slide, then I will show you, now you've been hit by ransomware, what activities should be happening, and some good guidance to kind of follow there. So hopefully this kind of guides you through. We can move to the next slide. Okay, so if you click that little resource button at the very top, it brings you to this master page. This page, I kind of have some arrows there kind of guiding you, right? So the idea is, I know it can be a little overwhelming. I know it's hard to know where to start. And so what I want to do is just take a second and just say, what are the resources that are included in here? Here's the things that I would pick out, if I was a local stakeholder or maybe a school district to kind of help get me started, right? So the first one is the fact sheets and information sheets. The idea here is it's going to provide you with some indicators of compromise. It's going to list for you the current variants that are out there, what maybe some detection opportunities are with the current variants out there, how they change the name of the file extension that usually goes along with the encryption. There's some playbooks there, etc. And then there's also a master index too. So if you're looking for something specific, you can crank it in there and at the bottom of the page, and it lets you do a search across the page to try to find the specific resource you're looking for. The key resource that I wanted to hit, like I said, the first arrow that I have there is the fact sheets information, specific variant information, investigation details, information around possibly making a ransomware payment, what to consider, how cyber insurance works, sensitive data, and PII handling recommendations. So we know when these events happen that we kind of get in a little bit of a chaos mode. And the idea here is on the preparedness side is to look through this, build this into your cyber incident response plan. And the first thing to do is, take back control of your organization, your environment by making really good decisions in a chaotic atmosphere. And the way we do that is by following these checklists, by following these fact sheets and information to help us organize our thoughts, organize our actions. That way we're not making ad hoc decisions in kind of a panic sense. We're following a methodology. The next arrow that I have down there is what we call that ransomware guide. Those of you that are not familiar, MSISAC and CISA partnered a while back, put together a two-part guide that's easily downloadable. And if you don't currently have a incident response plan or something similar, although there's lots of good information in the NCC's page, their cyber resource page also has a very good cyber incident response plan. The idea here is to provide you a guide to kind of get you going. And the guide really includes two parts. The first part is a ransomware prevention best practice guide. And so it's a pretty easy read, not too heavy or lift. It gives you just a good overview of some best practices as you start to prepare or build your cyber program. The second part of the guide is specific for a ransomware incident type checklist. That way you have it, some folks in a printed out binder when systems are down and they can turn to the checklist and follow that checklist type format to keep them on track and going. So I highly encourage you to take a look at that, download it, and include it into your activities. Kind of the bottom one there that I highlight, I know we've got quite a few K-12 sector on here. What CISA has also done is kind of launched over a period of time some different campaigns. And when they launch those different campaigns, they usually produce very specific resources or details around maybe a sector or maybe an activity that's happening. In this case, the reason I'm highlighting it is because in that underneath that campaign link is actually where all the K-12 community resources are for combating the threat of ransomware. At the same time of this part of COVID, we all transitioned to remote learning and remote working, and CISA put together some specific guides around how you secure those collaboration platforms and some best practices to keep in mind. So I just wanted to highlight for you, as you look at the resources, those are 3 easy ones to kind of get you started and kind of laid out for you why I think those are important. And then Jonah, we can move to the next slide. Okay, so if you remember from that main landing page, there was that middle block that I had a big yellow circle on. If you click that link, this one is a very specific page dedicated to now you've been hit by ransomware. So even though you maybe have a checklist ready to go, you kind of got your team formatted, you're trying to figure out what your actions are, this one is providing very specific guidance in a step action form as well with a significant amount of detail, right? Understanding the problem. That's kind of where it starts with number 1 there, determining which systems are impacted. You know, jump into a conclusion and trying to chase down and do a bunch of actions before we really understand, you know, exactly what systems, what critical systems are hit, what is the impact to our organization. And that's what it's really trying to do here is kind of put that into a framework for you so you can follow it. It's also got downloadable resource checklists, specific guides. It's got some detection and some analysis specific activities that you may not be familiar with or aware of. So I highly encourage you to take a look at that. It goes on to kind of move you through. And as you're working through this, you know, those next vital steps are that containment and then that eradication. And so in this document here and on this page, they give you those specific recommendations. So how do we start segmenting our network? How do we start making our environment a place where we can actually defend it? And, you know, the idea is to contain it as best that we can, understand the problem, do the malware analysis, and then eradicate it, understand the root cause. So hopefully that kind of gives you a good idea. I know that the NCC's Colorado specific cyber resource page also references this stopransomware.gov page. So it's on there as well as another way to kind of have a one-stop and then a link to some other resources. We can transition to the next slide, Jonah. We're going to talk about the CISA GitHub page. Okay, as well as, you know, we talked about CISA.gov, we talked about stopransomware.gov. A companion piece to that CISA has had up and going now for about 6, 8 months, 12 months almost, is our CISA GitHub page. And so hopefully most of you are familiar with similar GitHub pages as kind of a public repository, an ability to provide feedback, ability to kind of contribute across the community. CISA's page specifically has been used with the Exchange event, the SolarWinds event, Log.j4. And the idea here is, from a community approach, provide scanning tools, provide a script, provide some things to the community that they can help search for some of these, you know, recent events or incidents that pop up, and share those widely to try to get folks to gain awareness of their environments. And so I highly encourage you to take a look at it. Today, we're going to focus specifically about the tool that Maddie mentioned when we first started, which has been in production within US CERT and CISA for a number of years. And we call that tool the CSET tool, and it's just called the Cyber Evaluation Tool. And the idea is really a partnership with Idaho National Labs, one of our national partners, to build an assessment tool. And we're going to talk about it on a future slide here. But the idea is to have a tool that folks can download locally in order to conduct a self-assessment. Most folks that are doing this are in maybe a financial sector, maybe a banking, you know, financial or banking sector, maybe critical infrastructure, maybe a healthcare sector. And they may have very unique NIST guidelines or regulatory guidelines they have to follow. And one of the benefits of the tool is, we're going to see on the next slide too, is that the assessment allows you to choose one of those bodies of knowledge or frameworks, and then only have the questions that pertain to that body of knowledge. That way folks can get a good, you know, sight picture on how well am I doing, not just on the compliance side, but truly implementing the controls and the practices that go with it. And so I just wanted to show you that the way to get to the tool that we're going to walk you through here in a minute, which is that Ransomware Readiness Assessment tool built into CSET, is to download it from this CISA GitHub site. And I think we can move to the next slide on this one too, Jonah. Okay, so here it is. When you click that CSET link, I'm going to show you a screenshot of what it looks like. But I wanted to take a second here just to make sure everyone kind of understood what the tool is about, how it works, etc. And so we kind of hit it a little bit already, but it's a desktop software tool, guides network defenders, step-by-step process to evaluate themselves. If you haven't done one of these assessments before, maybe some of you are familiar with the Nationwide Cybersecurity Review, which is based on the NIST cybersecurity framework. But the idea is, before I jump in and try to do a self-assessment where I'm trying to grade myself, yes, I do this practice, no, I don't. I want to take a second and just say, you know, it's in your best interest to sit down and kind of build a team that's going to do the assessment with you, and then try to build some rubrics or some criteria or a methodology you're going to follow. Meaning that if I'm going to be assessing, I want good data brought in. And if I don't follow the same methodology when I look at questions, then my data is not going to be accurate, right? So the idea here is, before you do any kind of these assessments, start to build yourself maybe like, if we do it 80% of the time, then we're going to select yes. If we are more like, we hardly do it, it's ad hoc, less than 50, then we're a no. And then in between maybe that 50 and 80, then we're kind of in progress or working toward it. For some things we do it and some things we don't. That way, you know, when you come to a question and you're not sure where to land, you can go back to that methodology and then you're being as consistent as possible. Kind of the format that they follow here in the CSET tool, I think it's on a farther slide, sorry, but over there on the right graphic, you can kind of see the way the tool generally works is it helps you determine your assurance level. You know, that can be a low, medium, or high. And as you determine that assurance level, it then adjusts the numbers of questions. Then it's going to say you need to decide on what standard you want to use. Do you want to use the NIST cybersecurity framework? Do you want to use the Center for Internet Security top 20 controls? Do you want to use 853, NIST 853? And so the idea there is then you're following a set of standards. The tool also lets you to either bring in a network diagram, choose one of the templates that's available, or build your own network diagram. Because as we're talking about this assessment, it's very helpful to look at it from your environment, understand, does the policy and procedures I have go along with my ability to actually defend this architecture? Is this architecture, can I actually have a control point, a segmentation, a firewall, some way to limit the traffic across it? And so that's why they allow you to create the diagram. And then the obviously, you know, main part of the assessment is you answering those questions, trying to land on the right answers. The thing that is nice about the tool is right built into the tool, it immediately generates the analysis reports, and then it will kick out two specific, in this case for the assessment we're going to talk about today, two specific PDF full reports. One is the overall report and one will be the gap area report, where it shows these are the areas you need to work on, deficiency report. I think we can move to the next slide on it, Jonah. Okay, so at the bottom, you can kind of see the same methodology that I just explained. You know, as we begin one of these self-assessments, organize that team, determine the security level assurance, or the SAL is what they call it in the assessment, then select the body of knowledge or the standards. And what I have on this sheet are those examples that are built in already to the CSET tool. And I believe we're on CSET version 11.0.0.0, which is the most up-to-date tool. But you can select those assurance levels, really determines the number of questions, ranks from a simple, meaning when I select that assurance level, I can just do a simple format, or I can do it into a risk-based. And then they also, for government or defense industrial sector, they can actually choose the NIST 60 standard or the FIPS standard, which is what government agencies have to comply to. All the compliance requirements kind of range across the board from low, moderate, high, or very high. And then they form the assurance levels as well. You get to choose, those of you that are familiar with cybersecurity, cybersecurity practitioners, you're familiar with the CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. They actually let you score those across each one of those 3 areas to give you visibility as well. For school districts, I would say the one that I have the arrow on there, the ransomware readiness tool, that's what we want to show you today. But that one really, they've already chose the standards, which really come out of that NIST cybersecurity framework, the second one down, and they've already pre-organized the questions. So you don't have to go through and actually choose one of these methodologies or body of knowledges. That's already been done for you. But in a different scenario, or if you're doing a different part of the program, these are obviously all built into the tool as well. Okay, I think we can move on to the next one. Okay, so when I showed you the CISA GitHub page, on that CISA GitHub page is where that link was to that CSET tool. If you click that link, it takes you right to this page. You may have to scroll down a little bit, but you should see the CSET 11.x.x, and it's 0.0 is the current version. And right there is the exe installer. And so I guess I will throw out there for folks, make sure you're following your organizational policy, meaning you shouldn't just be randomly installing software if that's not part of the policy. Obviously, this is being provided by the United States government, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, but I would still ensure that you're getting the right permission, or possibly put it on a standalone machine that's maybe not part of the network or receiving those GPOs from the network. The idea is to give you a utility that you can use to do this. It doesn't have to be a networked box other than to just download it. After that point, you don't need internet connectivity or anything to run the tool. The tool allows you to run in that standalone mode. And then I kind of give you the arrow here on the left slide. And then as soon as you click the installer, then it gives you the next page where it explains the version 11, all the details, all of the requirements that the box needs to have in order to run it. And then it gives you that exe for download. Pretty much follow the defaults on the install path. There wasn't anything. I just actually downloaded on a personal computer too. Pretty much just followed all the standard defaults and installed just fine without anything. CISA also does provide the hash of the exe, meaning that if you want to ensure it is the legitimate one, you can run the hash against it and ensure it's a valid exe installer. And I think we can go to the next slide. Okay, so once you have the tool installed and you open it up, obviously on that CISA GitHub page, if you scroll down, I didn't show you the screenshot, but if you do scroll down, they actually walk you through screenshot by screenshot by screenshot as part of the installation of it. And then when you open it, how to actually start a new assessment. So I've kind of highlighted it here for you. I do believe they also provide a video, and I believe YouTube's also got several other videos on it as well. So if you're wanting to walk through that ahead of time, just to understand what it looks like to download, install it, and then build a new assessment, that's kind of what it's after here. So I just took the screenshots specific to running it for the new assessment. And like we talked about in the very beginning, this will be the Ransomware Readiness Assessment that's pre-built into this tool. It's based on a maturity model. They've already selected all the controls and it's pretty much ready to go. So as you click the new assessment, obviously you've got to put in some of those organizational level details. And right below, I kind of have the breakout screen there that I put. You choose the maturity model block and then you click next. And I think you can go to the next slide. Okay, then it takes you to this one. I think you may have to scroll down. Ransomware Readiness Assessment may not be the first one, but if you just scroll down the page, you'll quickly find it. And remember, it's underneath those maturity models. And then they explain here exactly how this works, what the Ransomware Readiness Assessment is kind of designed to do. What they basically did is took all the practices from some of those bodies of knowledge, and they said, during these attacks, what do we typically see as the 10 most important items to consider or to be part of your preparedness efforts in order to be able to, have some defenses in place and respond to and not let a ransomware event, stop your organization in your track. And so really you just click that part of that Ransomware Readiness Assessment. At the very bottom, there'll be a next button and you click that next button. And I think we can move on to the next slide. And in a second, I'm going to show you exactly what 10 domains they selected and kind of how the tool works. And then what we're going to do is have the panel go through. When I did the assessment, I kind of did example assessment. We called the school district the Rocky Cyber School District. And I chose, when I went through it, you can see here, there's 10 total goals, 10 domains. There's 48 total tiered practices. They fall into 18 basic practices, 16 intermediate, and 14 advanced. It is based on Cyber Essentials as well as the ransomware guide. And those of you that aren't familiar, it also pertains back to what we call the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Real quickly, the MITRE ATT&CK framework has been developed by the MITRE Corporation. And the idea there is the ATT and CK is actually an acronym, and it's, the techniques and the tactics that we typically see during a cyber kill chain. So if we want to understand it from an adversary perspective, typically that adversary follows the methodology in the MITRE ATT&CK framework. It does reconnaissance, gains an initial foothold, laterally moves. All of that is broken down in that MITRE ATT&CK framework so that we can understand the techniques and the tactics the attackers use. And the idea here is to make sure you're aware that the module, the ransomware assessment module, kind of follows that same methodology across the 10 areas. But it is a self-assessment, allows you to guide through. I'm going to give you the next slide here coming up, a couple of them, show you some of the little tricks within the tool and some of the little icons and kind of what they mean. At the end of it, you'll immediately get your results, which we're going to show you here in a second. It gives you the goal report across each one of the 10 goals. And then, like I said, it actually produces the PDF, which they call their deficiency report, highlighting those areas that probably need a little more attention. I think we can move on to the next one. Okay, so here are the 10 areas that they hit within that ransomware readiness assessment. And so if you want to think about these as 10 goals or 10 domains, you can see the fundamentals are all here, right? Backups are going to be important, and on a future slide, I actually show you what those questions look like. And then on the NCC Colorado Cyber Resource page, we can actually put a PowerPoint up where I've screenshot and copied every single question that the assessment asks you if you want to look ahead and see what those questions look like. Then they go into the web browser and DNS filtering. They talk about phishing, network perimeter, obviously asset management. If we don't know what assets we have, it makes it very difficult to protect them. They talk about the patch management process, user access, and security group access management, application integrity and allow list, the incident response actions, and then obviously risk management. So those are the 10 fundamentals, 10 domains, and the 48 practices they cover. I think we can move to the next one. So actually give you a copy, a screenshot copy of the first domain, which is that robust data backup. It explains to you what the domain entitles at the very top, and then it gives you the first two questions. And the idea here is I kind of broke down underneath the screenshot there. When they say DB, obviously we're in the data backup domain. And then when you see the B there, what they're indicating there is that is a basic, in those categories we have, that's a basic control or practice. And then obviously question number 1. So as you move through there and you get your results, you have to map your results back to those codes so you can understand which domain you're in. And then as you're answering questions, you get the choice from the yes response, the no response, or you can flag. And so from their definitions, when you say yes, you're saying fully performed. So use, again, kind of like I mentioned before, it's good for you to set that criteria ahead of time, right? And say, in order for us to say fully performed, obviously it's not always 100, break that down. We're going to say 75% or more, or 80% or more. That way, when you come to these questions, you can easily land on an answer. And then the no criteria, same idea, select the no criteria. When I went through this assessment for the Rocky Cyber School District example, I chose yes to all of the basic questions, selected yes on a few of the intermediate questions, and then selected no on all the advanced questions. So you will see that when Parker and JR go through the findings and the results, just for you to understand when I did the assessment and, as an example, that's how I selected it. And then I give you a little guide down at the bottom for each one of the little icons. The G, if you need more help on the question or not understanding exactly what the question is asking, you can click on that little G. The comments and notes allow you to provide notes to yourself as you go back through your analysis. That way you can see what you were thinking or what the group decided. The artifacts one lets you actually upload different artifacts. So if you're wanting to use this as part of your maybe 3 to 5 year plan for your cybersecurity plan, you can actually start to add artifacts that you've built that kind of correspond with the questions. The references one will lead you to the body of knowledge, whether that be the NIST framework or whether that be some other body of knowledge that it references. That could be the CIS top 20 controls or top 18 controls now with version 8. And then observations. Maybe when you were going through it, there was 2 people that, passionately disagreed whether there was a yes or no. And so maybe you can make some notes in there, and then a feedback option. And so that's what those little icons in there look for, each one of them. And hopefully that kind of sets the stage for us of what it looks like. And like I said, as I went through it based on the domain, this domain only had the 2 questions, but some of them had 10 to 15 questions. And so as you roll through it, you're moving through in the domain order that I kind of showed on the previous screen, and then you're providing your response, and then it's moving you into the next domain, et cetera, until you complete it. And so I think, Jonah, this is the point that you wanted me to kind of hand it back to you, tee up our 2 SMEs, our 2 experts that are kind of look at the results of our Cyber City school district, and then provide us their input and feedback. So I'll hand it to you now, Jonah.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. So I'm going to just do another introduction here for Parker and JR. Parker is going to go through the results first and give an overview of the output. Parker is the Information Security Manager for the Colorado Judicial Branch. And JR is our Senior Systems and Security Analyst for South Metro Fire, and previously has plenty of experience in K-12. We're referencing that just because we know that a lot of our attendees today are K-12. So that's great that we have that in the audience, and a coincidence that we picked a school district for what we are going to look at here. So I'm going to let Parker take over here, and Parker, just let me know when you want me to go to the next slide.
Great, Jonah, much appreciated. So as Dave kind of mentioned earlier, we've gone through that Ransomware Readiness Assessment, the RRA, right? And have kind of picked some answers to these different questions. And we're looking at what we call a fictitious Rocky cyber school district, right? Now, I've been brought in and I'm coming as a newcomer, right? They've hired me and said, hey, great, we want to build this new security focused program here, but we're really, really worried about ransomware. Can you help us just first focus on this ransomware problem before we get into any of the other things? So coming as a newcomer, I grabbed this tool, I've sat down, brought in the necessary stakeholders to give me information about our data backup and web filtering, and that helps really inform me of the district and what resources we have. And so now I've actually got a good foothold when approaching this organization and making decisions. So as you'll see here, we've run through and completed most of this. So the areas that Dave had referenced earlier, right, of your basic, intermediate, and advanced, we've got most of the basics covered, a little bit of the intermediates, but none of the advanced items. So we're going to progress through the outputs of this assessment a little bit, and I'm going to walk through my analysis and how I present this back to the stakeholders who are concerned with ransomware and asking, what do we do? How do we get started, and how do we progress here? So the most important thing with this assessment and the way it's formatted, when you take it to your stakeholders, you have to level set. 0% is not a rating of success. And it's not, hey, here's your security program, it has a big 0. This is a measurement of maturity, and it's aligned with those different practices that we have. So if you're taking this assessment, definitely level set that like, this is just a maturity measurement. It is not an overall rating of, you know, how advanced your security posture is and whether you've passed or failed from that perspective. So we'll jump to the next slide and look at the RRA practice scoring. So we can identify some of this security objectives that we want to get started with from this page. So we've used this self-assessment to kind of identify where's the largest risk reduction with the smallest amount of investment upfront that we can get. So this district is really concerned with ransomware, and we need some early wins. I've just come into this. I need to get some momentum, get this program moving, and help ease some of the tension with the district leaders, right? So we can see all of our different areas with low scores, and it would be easy to just focus on the lowest percentage complete and just go, there we go, that's it, that's the right answer, right? But comprehensively, the way that this is built, it's actually going to be better for us to dig in a little bit deeper, but this gives us a good outline. So we'll actually take a couple items from this, and I've gone in and assessed deeper, and I'll continue to explain, but we're going to take out the no answer for the robust data backup, incident response, and user and access management. Those are going to be just 3 high-level items that I'm going to be addressing as critical path for the rest of this assessment. And so we'll go on to the next screenshot here and go through. This is what's suggested, right? So the tool itself is naturally leading us to, hey, improve your weakest areas first. And that is a good recommendation. And if you've got nowhere else to go, no context, this tool is 100% going to lead you to reduce your weakest areas first. And that's great. I have taken and added my area of expertise to really pull out, hey, these are the quickest wins and the most impactful. So we will reduce the red on our screens here as we continue to progress, and that's what we'll sell to our stakeholders and leadership teams. And we're going to do that in a way that's most impactful to the school district. So taking a look at the next slide, we can bring a little bit of better color, green. I love green more than red, right? So while we reduce red on that previous slide, we're going to increase green here on this slide. And this is just part of communicating upward to leadership and to all of our other stakeholders. Here we are, here's where we're progressing, and this is where we're building maturity within our security practice. Now, to align our strategic plans with leadership, we want to highlight this area a little bit. Rocky Cyber is going to have different results from you when you go through this, and you're definitely going to spread your maturity across multiple areas. You may find you've got some more advanced in there and less basic, right? So it's really going to take you understanding your organization to know what's going to work and getting some outside input. There's tons of community members and resources available to help provide input. So most of our organization leaders here within the district see that advanced and they're like, we got to do advanced, right? We're a center of excellence. And it's important that we as the cybersecurity individuals own the narrative in this report, right? It's not just meant to sit with us as a security team for us to sit here and mull over. We do want to share it, and we do want to be open, honest, and upfront with what this assessment is. That allows us to control the narrative of here's where we're going to go. Here's how we get to advanced, right? And that'll be part of your process as you get through this. So I take this section to leadership, and I'm focused on what matters most to the district. So while our leadership may say, hey, advanced is where we need to be, I can say, we will get there, right? We are going to make the biggest impact up front and continue to progress. It does require that I be flexible, right? Throughout this process. If I get new information as we're trying to close these gaps, we can adjust, right? We can pivot and focus on new areas, but we're going to start with the basics, build momentum, and improve maturity over time. That's the message we're sending. So to our leadership team, we're going to close these gaps and continue to reassess, continue to provide this performance summary as we make progress. So this is not a one-time assessment. So to complete this overall identification of the key areas that I've pulled out of this to get the biggest impact, I've identified we need to test our data backup, right? That was a no answer in our robust data backup strategy, is that it's not tested at least annually, right? To get that started, here's how I am going to approach this with our business. I'm splitting it into two tasks. First, got to get all the players to the table, right? We're going to go through the rest of our assets. So in this assessment, we did answer that we do have an asset inventory, right? So we're going based off that assumption with testing our data backup. Now, we're taking that asset inventory and we're finding our critical data, our critical systems within that asset inventory. And we're focused, right, on data backup and restore to those critical systems for Rocky Cyber. So once we've identified those critical assets, we'll actually find our next maintenance window. We'll do a live backup and restore, and we'll record the process and document along the way. And that's going to be the biggest, hey, if we get hit with ransomware, we know our process works, right? We've got the confidence, we can recover. And that's going to be the biggest impact to our organization when we're just coming into this. Second, we answered no, that we don't run ransomware tabletops, right? We don't have an effective biannual process for doing these. So tabletops are really fun and they can quickly help us identify gaps in our process, single points of failure, individuals that may have all the knowledge and resources that we need to split some of that out because you're the only person that can do our data backups, and that's going to potentially lead to a problem, right? So there's a ransomware response plan here that I've built that's just a quick, almost tabletop scenario that has just a couple of action items that you can follow in line. This is supplemental to all the other CISA resources that have been presented here. But for me, this is what happens. Like, this is the actual process from my experience of responding to ransomware. So hopefully simplified. I take a look at it if you're looking for a process. Highly recommend at least get your tabletop ransomware event focused on just ransomware. So I've gone through and kind of set up a little scenario for that already, and that's how I would approach Rocky Cyber District for this. So the last objective is actually the most impactful objective, but to a small group. However, this objective has the largest known risk reduction when it comes to defending against ransomware. Multi-factor enforcements for privileged accounts and users. This is huge. Today's ransomware is taking privilege, right? They're taking those privileged accounts and actually executing on those. And I've got a small visitor. I forgot to lock my door. Hey, I love you. I'm on a call. Okay. Thank you. I love working from home. I love being able to just see my kids. So gonna refocus here for just a second. So this multi-factor enforcement for privileged accounts actually adds step to admin's work, but it's the good stepping stone for identifying that their privileges aren't needed 24/7. If they're being constantly interrupted by this MFA, we have another conversation to have of splitting out their privileged accounts. The other item here that I wanted to just quickly address before I hand over this to JR is to actually execute on this multi-factor enforcement. It's challenged, right? Because you have to get more buy-in, right? We have to convince people that this is the right way. Most people want to do the right thing, but change is hard, right? So in order to get this change within Rocky Cyber, I'm going to stress the importance that a ransomware event is going to take hundreds of hours away from these individuals. So that's how I would push this. And those are my 3 key objectives to get this done. Now, JR is going to take this a step further. He's going to bring some valuable perspective on this tool and with his experience. Over to you, JR.
Hey, thanks, Parker. I appreciate it. I think you made some really good points, especially about the RRA report, the Ransomware Readiness Report, kind of color coding things in such a way that you can easily see where you stand. Things that are green are good, red is bad, up and to the right is good, down and to the left is bad, right? But I felt like this is really a quick and easy way for you to easily see where things stand, even with limited organizational knowledge. I just joined the South Metro about 3.5 months ago, but I've previously worked in education, both K-12 and higher ed, and even spent some time in the classroom for all the grades K through 5. Really got a unique perspective on how technology is used at all of the different levels. And there are a few themes within education that you notice. There's a lot of sometimes there's the security teams and the IT teams. There's sometimes a bit of a tension between those groups, where you may have one person doing everything in IT at some districts, and that can impact your ability to get some of these policies off the ground. And so, when the CSET produces the Ransomware Readiness Report, that really helps you get some footing around where can I start, what things are within scope, what things are realistic for you to work on and what's not, what things can I get done on my own versus what things are going to require a larger budget or a larger team. There's also some common themes across the threat actor interests. Often they're always targeting education for those credentials, or trying to run some sort of a scam where they try to get someone in the accounting department to send a false payment to the wrong organization. Tricking people, and it really highlights the need for security awareness training, and that was mentioned on the report findings as well. And the organization culture often supports having strong IT, but there's also a need to figure out how we can bring IT into the fold without disrupting the classroom. How do we find ways to reduce the conflict between a faculty's classroom needs versus the privacy or compliance requirements that the business side of the house has to be in alignment with. For example, you might have a classroom that wants to bring a particular Google app into the classroom, but it presents some sort of privacy challenges. And kind of like what is shown on the screen here, are we able to bring security awareness up to a level where not just staff are receiving that training, but faculty and students, and maybe even parents as well. I think there's also kind of this relationship between the district parents and the classroom. And remote learning has really brought about a lot of interesting conversations, especially when the school districts are providing those devices or providing a Wi-Fi hotspot to students at home. You don't really know who's using those devices or what sorts of software is being installed on those machines, and that can have implications when they come back on campus as well. Can you go ahead and move to the next slide, Jonah? So we pulled out kind of the top 4 areas that were listed on the report and identified, 4 key action items that you might be able to take back with you. In the IR and backup section, that really we really felt like if you can find ways to build that resiliency through your offline backups, can we have at minimum a monthly backup, or if not more than that, of all of your data, something on site and externally as well. And inside of those incident response plans, make sure you're factoring ransomware in there as well. Do you have a law enforcement contact? Maybe you need to reach out to your local FBI office so you can trade those business cards ahead of time before the building's on fire. Another one that I've seen come up a lot is has the legal team and the communications team been brought into the mix in terms of what their role is during an incident? Does the legal team recognize that they have a role? Does the communications team know that there may be a need to draft approved communication articles to put on the nightly news if something did happen? Within the patching and asset management area, I know we're kind of tight on time, but like Dave said, you really can't secure what you don't know about. But if you can flesh out the things that are sitting on your network, identify who owns the system, the topic of who paid for it versus who fixes it, right? You may have a department that pays for a device and you have another group that fixes the device. And when you're looking at how do I patch these systems, the topic of replacing a system might come up. And that may sound like a great idea in practice. However, the idea of replacing every iPad in a classroom has a significant implication for a school district. There's a big cost involved. And so there often is a conversation around, is the juice worth the squeeze around, is replacing those devices, does the value add represent enough of an investment to where the school is going to reallocate their funds to say, okay, I'm going to spend $2,000 on new iPads, or I'm going to spend $2,000 on some sort of equipment for a classroom. And so that's what sparks a lot of those debates. But have a plan. The report from the CISA report that it produces is a great way to engage your stakeholders and have a thoughtful conversation around those areas. For risk management, identify what the sensitive data you have is. Where is it? Who has access to it? Another topic that Parker and I were talking about is would you know if you had an incident? Or how long from infection to incident declaration would it take before you actually had a game plan in place? Finding ways to do the basics, the basic blocking and tackling, ensuring you're logging unauthorized access, you're monitoring for system changes, strange or sudden connections, and then all the way down to your user access and management, making sure you have multi-factor turned on for everyone. That sometimes is a hot topic of debate, but I'm a strong advocate for putting that everywhere that you can get it. I know there are some challenges with system integration and smartphone availability, but there certainly are some opportunities for conversations to be had there. Avoiding sharing sysadmin accounts. Another one that's really hot right now is the topic of insider threat. So is there a way that you can work with your HR team to review the employee separation process and how accounts are decommissioned when somebody leaves the organization? How long is that account active for? How are people onboarded versus how do they become decommissioned? Those are areas that in my mind represent low-hanging fruit, or areas to at least have a conversation with your leadership to figure out, are there some ways that we can improve security together? And another one that I like to always throw out there is, can we find a way to require security awareness training in a similar way that we require other HR forms of training, like harassment training? Should security awareness be a flavor of harassment training that's tied to an HR record? There's a lot of different levers you can pull, but there's a lot of different conversations and challenging conversations to navigate within the education space. I know we're tight on time, and I tried to get it all in there for you, Dave and Jonah. That's kind of the long and the short of what I had.
Okay, great. I think the input from Parker and JR is pretty vital. Good analysis overall. So hopefully that gave a good overview of the insights you got from the 2 panel members, as well as the awareness of that self-assessment tool and the ransomware readiness assessment. I think I had one more slide, Jonah, but it's not essential. More than happy to have you and Maddie kind of close it out, or we can do a question and answer either way. From my side, those of you that aren't aware, CISA does have lots of no-cost resources to help your cyber program. That can be on the IT governance side, the assessment side we talked about today, as well as vulnerability scanning and remote pen testing, et cetera. So more than happy to, and I think Maddie, you have a link to some of that stuff on your Colorado resource page as well, but more than happy to answer any questions that folks have.
Yeah, thank you all so much. And we do apologize for it being a little shorter in terms of time for questions, but we do want to thank everybody who attended, and we'd be happy to share out those slides, and the recording should be ready pretty soon. There is a question though here from Eric that says, I just read an article that said companies that integrate cybersecurity awareness training with their safety training see a much better cultural acceptance and awareness overall. Just your reactions on feedback to that at all. Have you all seen something similar?
Yeah, ironically, we recently implemented a mandatory security awareness training, and integrated it with our LMS so that we could automate alerting and tracking of all of that. So that really helped to drive that message forward for us. And almost immediately after, we ran our regular phishing campaign, and we had some of the best results from a numbers perspective of more people were reporting it and less people were clicking it and being compromised. And so, yeah, overall, it worked really, really well. And then on top of that, some of our, our judges and the less technology focused individuals were actually more heightened now because that had been integrated. So yeah, it definitely plays into the culture of cybersecurity awareness and resilience.
Certainly, and I think more and more cyber insurance policies are starting to require cybersecurity awareness training for their staff as well. And I think the more ability you have to engage your HR and your senior leadership to make them aware of some of those requirements helps maybe your ability to position that argument of saying, can we make this requirement just like other flavors of HR training? So do you see a lift with gamifying? Yeah, I've heard folks within our organization say that they actually enjoy some of the videos and some of the exercises that they have to do. And I think every single security report that you have that shows like the Verizon report that comes out every year, almost every single report you see references cybersecurity training and awareness training being one of the top 2 or 3 things you could be doing within your organization to improve their ability to prevent some of these basic attacks.
Yeah, and that's a really good tee up for the next month. We're actually going to be kicking off a free cybersecurity awareness training that will be conducted every month, covering a different topic. Because we know there are tons of products out there and they are all really good, but sometimes paying for it and trying to do it in a way that's a regular awareness so that it does become a culture of cybersecurity rather than that one and done can be a little bit of a challenge. And so this is going to be orchestrated with some of our industry partners here in Colorado who are just doing that for the public good, and we're really excited to share that here soon. So be on the lookout for that. As a final note, I do just want to say again, thank you to our panelists. You all were fantastic. This is a big topic. It's a big challenge. I put my contact information and Jonah's contact information in the chat as well as a link to that Cyber Resource Center. And we'll be happy to share this out here shortly. I am going to also include a brief survey too, because we'd love your feedback on this topic and other topics that you want to see us touch base over the year. And just as that final piece again, know sometimes it is a lot, and this is a big piece of a really important security feature or security apparatus, and so if you have any questions while you start to dig into this, please do feel free to reach out to any and all of us. Like I said before, the whole point of this is just to try to feed a little bit of information out there. And really the bigger point is just to say, you've got friends here, and we're all working together on the same side. So please don't hesitate to reach out. And again, thank you so very, very much, and a happy Tuesday.
Thanks, everyone.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay.